Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am Jacco Van de Bruinhorst. I will be walking you through the process of making this little luxury letter opener. Let's light up the forge and start stacking our steel. We're going to be making this out of a twisted laminate pattern Damascus, so it's more of a Croille pattern. We're starting here with 25 layers of 15 and 20 and 1084. 15 and 20 has a bit of extra nickel, and 1084 has extra manganese. That extra manganese is going to turn the steel dark, and the extra nickel in the 15 and 20 is going to keep the steel shiny. Let's slide it in the forge. And here's our first welding heat. See, it's good and hot. We're going to stick these layers together here. My power hammer makes light work of everything. It is a 40 kilo Runfa power hammer. It is self-contained, meaning it generates its own air. And the beauty part of this power hammer is that it forges equally from both sides. And with the bar now forged out, it's time to let it cool and clean it up on my belt grinder. Once it's completely clean, I'll mark out 2 spots. And we're going to cut this billet into 3 sections. It's going to be 75 layers. Just straight up laminated pattern, twisted. So here I am restacking. Gonna lay it in my vise just to clamp them together. And using my MIG welder, we're just going to temporarily weld these pieces together. Weld a handle on it so I can move it in and out of the fire. And back into the forge. Once we have a nice welding temperature, we're going to forge weld these 3 pieces together. You can always tell if it's the right temperature if there's a little bit of steam coming around the billet. This is evaporating the liquid in the air. Now here I am forging it pretty much square. And then I'm going to knock these corners in, so it's going to be slightly octagonal. This will really help when we go to twist the bar. I am using a rigid pipe threader to twist my big bar. It's a little bit thick for me to just twist on my own. My wonderful wife Martina is going to help me turn the switch on and off as I hold the bar with a pipe wrench. I'm glad I'm this big. I really need all my weight to stand on the ground while this thing is twisting. It turns rather slow, but it does the job very well. It's very helpful having a switch turner on-er and offer. After twisting, I bring it up to welding heat and forge it out. If there's any tiny inclusions, these will close up. If there's any tiny delaminations, which there wasn't in this bar, they will close up in this stage. I'm drawing out the bar to its final length and width. And we're going to let that cool. We're just going to grind it a little bit clean before we mark out where our knife is going to be. And using my fiber laser, I'm just making the profile of the knife. Let's cut off that piece of steel. And then we're going to profile on my belt grinder. The great thing about the laser is that the line doesn't rub off, so it stays on while I'm doing all this profile grinding. Now we're going to just surface grind quite a bit of material off the sides. This is because the twist pattern is not that interesting near the outside, but once you start to grind into it. And this is why we're leaving it so thick even on the blade, because I want the most interesting pattern to be on the blade. So into some heat treating cycles. And here's the knife fully annealed. We're at 406 thousandths of an inch here, so we're going to take that down a little ways. The surface grinder with the belts really does it quite efficiently and quickly. Just a hair over 360 thousandths. Perfect. Now we're going to reprofile, make sure that all the lines are smooth and tidy. All the lines are where we like them to be. Use the small wheel attachment here. Using some layout fluid, we're going to make the sides of the knife blue. And we're going to scratch some lines. This will kind of determine how thick our blade is going to be, and also determine where the facets will be on the handle. I'm using here the waterfall platen, which is letting the belt run over the edge straight down, and I'm using it to clean up the very front of the handle. And this will put a nice tiny and tidy radius on the front of the handle. You have to run this belt quite slow, otherwise you can break it. We're going to grind the handle facets in. Going to have 2 facets on the side of the handle. I really quite like that look. There we have our facets roughed in. We're going to hand sand all the scratches out. Hand sanding is a good skill to learn. It makes something like steel, which is hard and rigid, look almost soft. Then using the laser, I am marking out where I'm going to have some gold inlay work. This is engraved at a depth of about 10/1000ths of an inch. Then using my little Lindsay foot control engraver, with a little chisel, I'm going to undercut all these lines, basically putting little notches in the bottom of the trough. That way, when I go to press my gold in, it will sit in the trough and it'll be pressed in and around and under these notches. And those notches will really hold the gold in, and the gold will never fall out. There's all the gold in. This is always a fun part. You start to hand sand that gold off. There we have beautiful gold inlay. Then using some Condorcel, we're going to dip the handle. Don't really need to dip the blade, but I do want to make sure that the ricasso of the blade is covered. Condorcel is an anti-scaling compound. Now we're going to go in for hardening. Got this giant kiln for a tiny knife, but that's alright. So we're going to set that in there and let that come up to temperature. It's going to soak there for about 10 minutes. We're going to pull it out and quench it. Here it is quenched, very hard, and ready to temper. And I temper it in my kitchen oven because my kiln takes so long to get down in temperature. 400 degrees for 2 hours twice. So this is after the heat treatment. So let's clean up the handle and the blade with some sandpaper. This doesn't take too long. This Condorcel really does a good job. And now we're going to focus our attention on the blade. We're going to put a scribe line in the very center of the blade. And then we're going to start to grind the blade. This blade is going to have a full flat grind. But before I grind the flats, I do what I call a pre-bevel at the 15-degree angle. This kind of keeps the edge off of the belt while I'm grinding. So therefore it keeps the edge cool. You won't have to worry about overheating. Again, we're going to clean this up on the waterfall platen. The waterfall platen really helps to get very neat and tidy plunge lines. I saw the waterfall platen first being used on one of Kyle Royer's YouTube videos. Kyle Royer is a master smith and a fantastic maker in the USA. It really does offer a huge advantage on creating very neat and tidy plunge lines. I'm sanding and sanding. And here we are before etch. I cut in 2 little lines to separate the band on the scroll. Let's clean it up here. That pattern is starting to look really nice. We really do want to make sure that we hand sand every 10 minutes or so. My acid solution is rather weak, so it took about a good hour and a quarter. Put a little bit of oil on that. We're going to make a display for this knife, so that's what we're going to do now. Using 2 pieces of Boccati wood, we're going to start marking out some lines. So this is going to be the base part, and I like it to have rounded ends. So I find just a random round thing that's roughly the size that I need and trace around it. This is going to be a display that I like to call a floating knife display. It's somewhat cane shaped, and in the very top of that cane there will house 2 little magnets. I'm drilling some pinholes, and I always like to drill a hole through the cane part because it's otherwise somewhat weak. So I put a pin in there, and you never have to worry about it breaking. Using a little drill, I will drill where the magnets will go, and I will glue in the first one. Let's give this a try. There we go. That's looking really cool. Now we're drilling those alignment holes through the cane part. Put some pins in there. And we're going to now finish the base. The base has some nice rounded edges. And we're going to make sure that our cane portion looks very nice and tidy. Sanding everything nice and round. And then using my orbital sander, just make sure that I really get all the scratches out and make it nice and smooth. Then with a sanding sponge, I give it its finish sanding. This is a pretty fine sponge. And we're going to use some oil on these wood parts. The oil will really help bring out the luster and shine and kind of protect its color. And we're going to move on to hand sanding the blade and the handle. So all the Damascus parts, everything that's Damascus must be hand sanded to 1200 grit. And then we polish. Make sure it's good and shiny. And now we're going to wash it good with a cloth. And we're going to put it in some instant coffee. The instant coffee will really make the 1084, that manganese steel, to be very dark, while yet still keeping the 15 and 20, that nickel steel, very shiny. Spritz some gun oil on there. And we're finished. Let's assemble the stand. It spins really nicely. The Damascus turned out really, really nice. I really, really like this Croille pattern. 75 layers is a nice amount. And that gold really turned out very nice. It's always nice to add a third color to your knife. This knife is not my own design. It is designed by Wolfgang Loerchner of Canada. He's one of the greatest knife designers in the world. All of his knives are 100% handmade, hand-filed, hand-polished. And I'm grateful to him to have let me use this pattern. Here it is on its stand again, spinning. It's like magic. Thanks again so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Thank you for liking and subscribing. You really help me grow this channel. And we'll see you on the next one.